Hello, everyone, and good whatever moment of this wonderful day you are enjoying on your time zones. It is such a joy to welcome you to a conversation from our May series. It's May already, and this is the Mental Health Month. So throughout the following days and weeks, we will be having conversation focused on mental health and why that is such an absolute must have focus within our organizations. My name is Minola Jacques. For the next hour, you can call me Hacking HR. I'm a journalist by trade, a change manager by choice, and an absolute Hacking HR supporter by calling. And I will try to make the next hour as enjoyable as possible. We have Jessa with us backstage, and I will ask her to bring out our amazing speakers today on the screen. And while I will welcome them, I will just let you know that the title of today's conversation is Removing the Stigma, How HR Can Shape an Organizational Culture Where People Talk About Mental Health. Such a timely and much needed conversation. So, what I will do, I will ask the speakers to introduce themselves. I will pass the e-mic around as you appear on my screen clockwise. And the first question has two small parts. Firstly, please kindly introduce yourselves. And then in a very short, value-packed sentence, why is mental health so critical for organizations, especially at this moment? But I will give you a few seconds to get ready. I will welcome our audience. And please, as always, do drop comments in the chat. Let us know where you're listening from. Let us know where you're watching us from. And please, please, please do consider this conversation as much yours as it is our panelists. Build your own conversations, answer to the questions, raise other questions. We will be keeping an eye on your comments, and we are always happy to bring in highlights from your side chat into our main conversation. So, enough of this. Welcome, everyone. And Sajal, you go first.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sejal Javed. I am Chief HR and Culture Officer at Ali Theater in Houston, Texas. I'm very excited to be here. So, the question was why mental health is so important in the workforce right now. I think mental health was always important. We just didn't pay attention to it a few years ago. But now, since the last 3 years have unfolded with COVID and then the racial reckoning that has happened, we have given more attention to mental health, especially during COVID when people were all, in their homes and working from home and not meeting other people and stuff like that. Also, the other thing that has happened in the workforce that I'm seeing now is that we have a much younger generation in the workforce. Like, for example, for us, we are 74% of our workforce right now is Gen Z and millennials. And they are very vocal and open about their mental health, not like my generation, I guess I would say. So that is why it's very important to discuss mental health, keep it in the top of wherever you're discussing employees, employee engagement, and employees. So that is why I think in the workplace, it has to be something that is open and talked about it, and everybody feels comfortable with it.
Thank you so very much. Deborah, welcome. Good to see you again.
Hi, good morning. Deborah Maynard, and I'm the Chief HR Officer for Coast Mental Health in Vancouver, British Columbia. And for me, mental health employees, is so important because it impacts their overall well-being. I mean, which in turn then impacts their job satisfaction and the retention in the workplace. So employees who are struggling with mental health issues are more likely to experience, stress, burnout, and other negative outcomes, and that's going to impact their well-being and then their work performance. So for us, for me, it's just mental health encompasses everything in the workplace, and the impact is so broad that you can't even begin to think about all the little components that are impacted. So thank you for the opportunity to talk.
Thank you. Jana, welcome. Good to see you today.
Yes, good to see you and meet everyone here. My name is Gianna Figueroa Kirkpatrick. I'm the Director of People Operations at Verdad Real Estate, which is a commercial real estate company based in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in Texas. I'm so happy to be with you all today. And mental health, for especially being a zillennial, is a very top of mind important topic for us to talk about today. But really, I feel that if it's not talked about, it's affecting our employees' productivity. And at the end of the day, a lot of companies they're worried about, making money. And if your employees aren't productive and this conversation isn't happening, employees aren't going to be able to work to their best of their ability to essentially make the company profit. And that's why I think it is such an important topic. And a lot of companies are missing kind of that piece of the puzzle there.
Thank you. Last but not least, Robin, this is the only time when going last is not so stressful. Welcome.
I don't mind. Thank you. It's an honor to be here with all of you. And I am Robin Arville, the Chief People and DEI Officer for the Natural Resources Defense Council. We're a leading environmental organization. And to me, it is, we are one whole being, right? We can't separate our professional selves and our personal selves, especially the pandemic has taught us that. And so mental health to me is actually an equity issue. It is very much across the board, especially more so for marginalized groups. And we have to talk about it, right? There are increasing number. I think the American Psychological Association has already shared that it's tipped more than 50% of people having major stressful events in their lives this past year or two. And it shows up, as my panelists have said, across the board. So it's an imperative. It's vital we talk about it also from an equity lens.
Thank you all so very much. So many conversation can disrupt in this round alone, and as we will go through the conversation, we will pick them up. And I was just looking at the comments, and it's always amazing to see how diverse our audience is. From these comments, I can only pick on the geographical element. But what I would encourage you as we go through the topic today, what we've seen is that workplaces have different expressions and different nuances across cultures, across generations, across gender, across all those intersectionalities that we've been talking about. So please do bring that diversity into our space and tell us how you experience mental health conversations. And here's the first question to the panel and to everybody. Let's demystify a little bit the very title of this panel. And you've already mentioned that with the new generations coming into the workforce, with COVID and everything that we have been navigating since spring of 2020, this conversation has grown more and more into its own. However, there's still a long journey ahead. And I would first ask you, what does a workplace that still has stigma around mental health, what does it feel like? What does it look like? What does it sound like? And I will just ask Deborah, for example, to lead us into this round of answers, and then everybody consider the unmuting competition officially open and just build your own conversation.
Thank you. But I think in some ways, it's really quite easy to say what it looks like because it's what it doesn't look like. It's not open communication. People aren't talking about conversation. People, when you ask them how they're doing, you just get the fine and everybody's just, on a having surface conversation. And really, for me, it is, probably one where people aren't interacting a lot because people are a bit more stressed out and burnt out, and you may not see the same level of engagement and sort of excitement. And when you walk into that workplace, you may just feel that it's a little bit dulled. So it's like you how you walk into a place and you think, oh, there's just something not right here. I mean, to me, that's what a workplace that still has the stigma around it. And then you probably never hear conversations about each other, or having conversations supporting each other. And maybe when managers walk into the lunchrooms, if there is conversations, then they stop and they're stilted. So to me, those are some of the things that you might see in a workplace that still has the stigma attached.
Jana.
Yeah, I'll definitely piggyback off of what you were saying, Deborah. I've worked in an environment before where mental health was just not at the top of the mind of our leadership team. And folks just didn't want to take time off because they would seem weak. Or I'm taking a personal day, or I'm taking a sick day. That wasn't even a part of, some of those conversations. And it really created a very negative, almost cloud-like atmosphere where, people were going through their day-to-day tasks, but they weren't truly interacting beyond, hey, what are your weekend plans? That's, not a great conversation point. Or if you want to build a deeper connection with, your coworkers. So it's a very negative atmosphere if mental health isn't addressed, or if people don't feel like they can even take some time to get right with themselves. I've felt that myself in the past, where I'm like, oh man, I have a lot going on, but I'm not going to talk about it because that would appear to be weak. So I'm really glad that we're having this conversation today.
Robin, would you like to go next? I see you looking for the unmute.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I also feel like it starts with the leaders modeling this, across our organizations. I'm a huge proponent of restoration and keeping our resilience strong in the midst of such complexity in our work environments. And if we don't model it as leaders, then who will, right? And normalize it. I'm open in saying I need a mental health day. There's a lot going on, and I just need a, right. I'm very much about, hey, no, you're not going to see emails from me in the evenings or on the weekends, because I really want to, exemplify the behaviors of rest and restoration. I think we've got to be talking about it, and we don't shy away in my organization of actually really talking about it openly. We know burnout is real. We know people, are using the terms languishing, since the pandemic, and it continues, right? Especially in this hybrid world. We haven't come out of it, even if it's been 3 years, and we haven't found the right ways of actually addressing some of the stresses and burnout, that we continue to have. And so I think it's up to leaders to really model that and exemplify that as well.
I guess it's me now. So when I think about stigma of mental health, what is stigma? Stigma is basically just like a negative attitude or behavior you have towards a characteristic a person may possess, right, or a group may possess. And then what happens when you assign a stigma to something? In the workplace, there's discrimination that happens. So stigma and discrimination go hand in hand. So when you put it, so let's say if somebody has a substance abuse disorder or some type of a mental health disorder, and you know about it in the workplace, somebody has it, and like Gianna said, you look at them as being weak, or you look at them as having an issue, and but the reality of it is that now when we think about it like this, then you're discriminating against that person, and not giving the person the tools to handle it. And that is where I think the intersectionality of mental health and DEI come into place, that we have to look at it from that, because a lot of why DEI is so important mental health, because the marginalized groups feel more marginalized when you are discriminating against them based on any of those issues. And we already know that the mental health there is a mental health crisis right now. I mean, we have to say that, because it is. People, I feel like employees, just in experience in talking to people, I feel like the people's cup is full. There's like they're literally, it feels like they're at capacity, and how do we handle the employees in our organization when they're feeling like that? How can we support them? And that is a conversation that we need to have from leadership to all the way down to whatever level you want to take it. So I think that's very important when we look at stigma and discrimination for mental health.
Mm. I love how from your answers we already start to see that this is a very layered conversation. And I also felt that there's a lot of energy to talk about how this is a leader's responsibility, and how leaders come into this space of talking about mental health, and role modeling healthy conversations around mental health is so crucial. So let's give it a bit of space, and let's look at what is a leader's role and what is a leader's accountability when it comes to mental health in the workplace. And let's see who goes first. Who
I'm
wants to lead the way?
I'm
Robin.
happy to talk about it. I think there's, as leaders, we hold a lot of power on the systems, and processes and structure in an institution. I'm not a fan of saying, oh, let's have a meditation session during lunch hour.
Hmm.
That doesn't help, right? These one-offs, because what if, that lunch hour people are working because they're overloaded or there's so many meetings. So we have to look at the whole system and what we are either enabling or the practices that are no longer healthy for us, right? Especially during the pandemic, where we had everybody work from home. People were starting work much earlier, and ending work much later, right? Compared to being in the office where you can physically close your laptop, and then commute home. So people are working longer hours. And so, what is it about our structures, our meeting culture, right? The meetings that people have where we're not thinking about people with um, neurodiversity, issues, or even mental health issues, being in the video on all the time, the virtual screen and how that brings migraines and headaches, to people who's always needing to be on. So these are the things that we need to really look through in our processes, in our structures, in our systems that actually enable and embed really kind of bad behaviors that lead to mental well-being being sacrificed. And the other thing is, again, as leaders, to talk about it normally. I've burnt out in roles. I've gone through really deep and hard mental issues during the workplace as well. It's hard to try and homeschool your child and do everything and be all. And so I think we've got to normalize the conversation as leaders and really pave the way to embedding it in the institution. One thing that I'm doing this month is hosting a listening session and being in community with my staff, simply because it's talking about mental health awareness and well-being. What tools, what ways we can help each other through this, what are the practices that we want to embed and cultivate in the institution so we're not feeling alone in our struggles. So I'm leading that listening session, and I hope to have a really good conversation with the staff.
Every organization should have a very robust wellness strategy, and part of wellness is mental health. So I feel if you normalize that in your organization and you make it as your organizational framework to focus on employee wellness, then mental health is automatically incorporated in that. Also, with leadership, what people don't realize is that it's a psychological safety issue. Also, when people don't feel safe or they're suffering from some sort of mental health, whatever it is, but they don't feel safe at work. And if they don't feel safe at work, then they're not bringing their full selves to work and they're not participating. And then you have all these issues that you have with employees that are not engaged, burnout, they're not taking care of themselves, they're not taking care of the business. So all of this happens. I think we have to, as a leadership, create a culture of trust where it's like, okay, if somebody does know about it, somebody does find out, it's okay, I'm going to have the resources available for my employees so I can help them deal with this, because at the end of the day, our employees are our biggest resource that we have in an organization, and we have to take care of them if you want to move forward. The employee assistance programs are great in helping and giving resources to people. I tell my staff, if 2 o'clock in the morning you feel like overwhelmed or stressed, you can call the EAP and talk to somebody, licensed person, instead of not knowing what to do. So employee assistance programs works. If you have, maybe as you establish a wellness committee that talks about different things and topics and health topics, maybe bringing in, doing Zoom sessions or bringing in therapists or something, and giving staff the tools and tips on how to handle, even if it's stress or even if it's anxiety, and how that manifests itself and how you can handle it. So these are all the things that if you start doing in the organization, you're starting to normalize it. You're starting to say, you know what, it's okay, we can have it. How do we manage it? How do we take care of it? How do we take care of you? So as from the leadership's perspective, they have a very important role in normalizing all of these things in an organization.
Thank you, Sajal. Jana, I saw you unmuting yourself.
Yes. I will say a lot of times I've come across leaders in our organization that haven't had any training. Like they just, mental health is not a thing on their mind. They're worried about, meeting sales quotas. They're, worried about maybe providing adequate training to their teams, but they're not thinking about, hey, is this person doing okay in their personal life? Are they, well rested enough? I know a practice that I used to do at a previous organization was look at how many hours we had people track their hours and look at how many hours they were putting in. But I know we were also worried, what if people aren't tracking their full hours because they don't want to appear like they're burning out? When in reality, they really were. So as an HR leader, it's really our job to make sure our leaders are educated on how to approach these conversation types of questions, because you don't want to pinpoint someone and make them feel uncomfortable to talk about what is going on in their lives. And leaders also need to establish check-ins with their employees beyond just like, hey, where's the status at with this project? They need to check in with, hey, I know you mentioned a few months ago about a situation with your father. How's that doing? Do you need any extra time to spend with him? And those are different types of conversations that leaders need to have in their vocabulary to really support their employees' growth and mental health well-being altogether. It is leading by example. So just like Robin said, hey, I need to take a mental health day. That needs to be more a part of their conversation as well. And HR needs to support that. If you see a manager and they're working here, I've seen people work from 7:30 a.m. to like 6:30 at night and 12-hour work days. That's not healthy. So I like to address that right then and there and say, hey, why don't you'll work from home the next day? And our workplace may look a little different. I see that because we're in office. If we're remote, do we see that? Do we see their green little status symbol that they're active from this amount of hours? So those are different things that we can look at and then help support our leaders to support their teams.
I'm just going to add to what Gianna said, and that's a great point, that we need leadership to be trained, because a lot of managers are not trained to see if their employees are struggling. They don't know what the signs are. So when you have all these trainings for your
just 1 second. So sorry for interrupting. There's a background noise that makes it quite difficult to hear. I don't know if. Okay, let's try now, Sajal, and I apologize.
No, that's okay. I was just saying we have to train our leaders so that they can spot it. They can see if an employee is struggling, and if there's an issue, and to approach them in a manner which is open and empathetic, and say, you know what, I'm here. What can I do for you? So I just wanted to add to what Gianna said.
Thank you. Deborah, my heart goes out to you. You're going last.
It's completely okay. So to me, leaders have, so many critical roles to play, and everybody's talked about that. I mean, leaders, for them, I mean, they're the example to their employees. If they're not modeling those behaviors that promote mental health in the workplace, people aren't going to feel comfortable. If they're not taking regular breaks, why would their staff take regular breaks? If they're not prioritizing their own self-care and they're coming in sick and stressed, their staff and their team are going to notice that. So, to me, that's, one key thing. Leaders are the ones that create the culture in the workplace. So if they're, talking and having open communication and, talking about, mental health issues and, about resources that the organization provides and, creating a safe space, then, employees aren't going to have those conversations. I mean, there's, leaders are the ones that provide training in the workplace. They not only, can they provide training on, sort of the typical sort of work related things, they can provide training on, how to be more resilient, how to manage stress, how to support colleagues that might be struggling with mental health. So if they're providing, resources, that's going to help an organization. And, they also are the ones that really can identify stressors. I mean, it's not only the employee that needs to identify that, leaders need to identify stressors that, excessive workload, lack of resources, conflicts, interpersonal issues, all those things that go with, a challenging work environment. I mean, leaders are the ones that, are the ones that are looked to and have the ability to influence those things. So I think, leaders' role is critical in mental health and support for their employees.
Mm. Thank you all so very much. I just looked at the clock, and very much to my surprise, we are minutes away from the middle of our conversation already. So I will take a few seconds just to say hello and welcome to everybody in the audience who joined a little bit later. And to those of you who just joined, or to those of you who need to jump off before the hour, don't worry, you can always go back to hackinghrlab.io and watch the recording either of this conversation or everything that happened in March, April, and you will get heads up on what we're cooking for June and beyond. Now, I heard that leaders are critical. What we've seen in many conversations is that there's a lot of almost lopsided accountability placed on the leaders. So let's go through the other layers and through the other perspective inside the organization. I heard that you mentioned leaders generically. We also touched a little bit on HR leaders. So let's go down that avenue for a little bit. How can we talk about mental health within the HR dimension, knowing full well that this is a function closest to burnout, if not deeper into burnout than almost any other? So, how can we be there for ourselves in order to be there for others? How does mental health conversations within HR look like at the moment?
I can talk about that a little bit. From my team, we actually openly discuss mental health, and when we're discussing employees, we talk about, are there things that we need that we would like to see more of, and really just keeping that conversation open. I think my whole team went on mental health first aid training, sort of to be able to understand, because of course I work in an organization that supports clients with mental health, but people tend not to help themselves because they're helping clients. So they're so engaged in the client that they forget about individuals. So when we're in HR, we talk about it. We talk about the stigma that may have, even working in a mental health organization, saying that you have a mental health issue, because it's only the clients that may have that. So we discuss how do you engage in those conversations when you're noticing people. What resources can we have? What more would we like? And that's sort of how we approach it. And we try to have those open conversations within ourselves, and making sure that we're taking the time to check in with individuals, how they're doing, because I think that that's one thing. We all get so busy, and we're checking, need to get that done and get that grievance done, and send that over, that we forget to check in with the manager. And so we just make sure that we're making space to do that and have those conversations. It doesn't take a lot of extra time, but it may make a lot of difference for people.
I would like to add this over here. When almost 3 years now, looks like COVID and everything that happened, shutdown happened. We were laying off staff, taking care of staff, managing all the expectations of staff. I'm talking about HR, was doing all of those stuff. And we were stressed. We were working long hours. We were stressed, just managing and laying off people, and, just doing their severance packages, doing all of those things. That was very stressful. And also, just supporting our employees. At that time, I remember I went to my boss and I said, you know what? I don't think you recognize that HR is taking care of all of the employees that we have. We are. But did you ever think who's taking care of HR? And nobody thinks that we may be feeling all of those emotions and stress too, because people come and tell us all of their emotions and all of their stress. So we have to recognize that yes, we support these populations, but we also have to take care of ourselves. And our managers, our leadership team has to support us also, and recognize and realize that we can be going through those things also as HR professionals, because we take on so many of the feelings and emotions of the entire organization, not just one person. We're not just dealing with our stuff, we're dealing with everybody else's stuff. So supporting that, just thinking HR is there also, we have needs also from that perspective, and vocalizing that, and be your own advocate in your organization, so they realize that, what, you can be going through some stuff also. So it's each and every one of us in this mental health situation.
I like what you said, because it is about understanding that HR professionals are really stewards and shepherds of a culture. And we do take so much of the energy of the people that we do serve and that we forget, right? It's all about that oxygen mask and putting that, on first. I think I remember in the pandemic that we are nowhere close to our healthcare workers, but we are the frontliners for staff, for the institution. And so the term compassion burnout, compassion fatigue, because we're so compassionate and because we give to, these are our stakeholders, these are our clients, that there is this compassion burnout because we're taking it on and we're also feeling it ourselves. So how do we also exemplify as a team, as a community, that things are always invisible, right? Especially mental health. It's the invisible, it's that stigma, but to actually talk about it and honor it, and honor was remarkable in seeing in my institutions, especially during pre the pandemic and post the pandemic. There was a lot of recognition and a lot of just honoring the work of HR during this time. We had to pivot, right? When you think that everything was normal and all of a sudden the world had to pivot, and HR was the one that had to pivot, especially when there were so many individual cases. Even to this day, everything is so individual about an employee. How do you keep that resilience? How do you keep that empathy when you're trying to also be there, for people? We need to be invested in that level of training, in that level of resilience. We're not, there's a lot of HR people that are not psychologists, right? That are not practitioners that can, be there. And so bringing in supports like, an employee assistance program, bringing in stress reducing, people who are really good at talking about it, are means that HR can not only take, but really bring in people, bring in the EAP programs and the practitioners to help the staff as well as us, put that oxygen mask on.
You all have said such great things. But honestly, thinking back to the pandemic as well, there were times and situations where one specific one, we had to lay off an employee whose wife had just been laid off. They also were on the list to be laid off as well, and they were expecting their second child. And it was such a heartbreaking moment for me because I wanted to make sure they were still taken care of financially from just a baseline perspective. And I remember just crying to my husband and just like, why is this happening? I don't understand the decision behind this. And I think HR professionals just need to continue the conversation and be vulnerable with one another. Right now, I'm a small HR team of myself and one other individual. So at least we have each other to kind of rant and go off of each other. But our job is we're supporting a people in the commercial real estate side who don't necessarily want to talk about their backgrounds or what's going on at home. It's much different from a organization with a lot of 20 to 30 something year olds who want to talk about that all the time. So it's our job to kind of address situations when employees aren't so forthcoming with wanting to address them. But there's also a line of professionalism that we never want to cross. So it's hard. But there are things I personally do for myself every single month that are part of my checklist. I'm like, just checking in with myself. How am I doing? Let's go get me a massage or different things like that to make sure I'm still doing okay so I can bring my best self to my organization.
Thank you all so very much. And you so naturally brought the conversation to the point of what is everybody's responsibility in this conversation beyond hierarchy, beyond functional pockets. And I was going to just ask this question exactly like this, but then looking at the comments, I picked up a topic that got a little bit of traction. So the question is still that one, but with a small additional spin. How can we, each and every one of us, contribute to this conversation and also safeguarding it from being misused. I don't want to say contributing to the stigma, but how can we make sure that mental health support is not being misused or abused or inappropriately harnessed?
I think, if you don't mind, I'll go. I mean, for me, it's that's a very difficult one because people can take and then start talking about conversations afterwards. But I think really people I think it's the same as with diversity. You need to stand up and stop the conversation when you're hearing conversations that are misusing what people have said. You need to educate yourself around mental health, and how it can impact individuals, and really just say something if you're hearing people sort of have that conversation, and maybe promoting more evidence-based information, so it's just not opinions around individuals, and their mental health. And I think another way is if you share your own experiences, people are less likely to misuse the information. They're because especially if you're somebody that others respect, they will see that it's okay, and that they don't have to sort of negatively talk about someone just because they may have mental health issues, because someone they've respected has had that conversation. And really, I think as individuals, everybody should be advocating for change. I mean, it's our own, and it's our individual, it's the organizations and leaders' responsibilities, but it's our responsibility as a person to sort of be the change that you want to see. So advocating for that to me is quite important.
Thank you, Deborah. Just one very, very quick clarification. That is one angle to it, but another one, the one that we picked up from the comments, were what if people abuse their mental health days?
So generally, I mean, I've had situations happen like that where employees would just go on FMLA whenever they wanted, or something is happening, I'm taking a mental health time or whatever. But generally what I have seen is, if you are a good employer and you treat your employees well, the abuse is not that prevalent. It may be one or two employees that may be doing it, but in general, most of the employees do not do this because they take pride in their work, they take pride in it, and that is very important to them, what they're doing. So I think and the person that is abusing them, I think as an HR person, our role is to have a very heart to heart talk with that person and say, hey, what are you seeking, what are you looking to do, because this is, we're trying to help you, but this is not working. And I think just having that open and honest conversation. But I have felt that, if you are an employer that takes care of your employees, treats them well, give them the resources, the factor of abuse does go down a lot. It's not that prevalent. That's what I have felt.
I think it's also honest conversations, right? And this goes back to training of our managers and training of our leaders. There aren't, it's not a skill that is easy to get. How do you have these conversations, these vulnerable conversations, especially during the time of racial reckoning, and there's just so much trauma, right? Anti-Asian violence, all of this, and how do you speak with your staff about that? These are very critical conversations to have, and I think HR can really play as a good partner in supporting these conversations. And I think it really needs to be honest and needs to be clear. Should they be going, what other ways that they need to be supported and resourced, and at the same time, without being irresponsible. We are organizations that do need work and do need our mission to be fulfilled. And so those, having a compassionate yet very clear and supportive means of what's going on, and really being that vulnerable, it needs to be a conversation, and it needs to be also, look, we have values, we care about our people, but also, we're a business, we need to run. So having those honest conversations, I think, can also go a long way. But that does take skill, to be able to have that psychological safety, to be able to have that understanding of what the needs are, and boundaries. The institution as well needs boundaries, with employees. It is, it's impossible to continue to move on when these constant time offs happen. We are still a business after all, so it's balancing both. Yeah.
Robin, you brought a very good point in here. I just want to add to that what you said is that training HR. Now, I'm a social worker turned HR professional, so I have that background. So mental health, I mean, I can at least know a little bit about it, not a whole lot, I would say, but still have some training and background in it. I think in this day and age, it is so important for all HR professionals to have some level of training to learn and how to spot mental health issues and concerns and stuff. And I would say that if you have a health broker, you have brokers for your benefits, utilize them because they have a lot of free resources and seminars that they can assist you with. Also, utilize your EAP because your employee assistance program has assistance for managers, and they can help you with all the issues that you may be having, and just calling them and saying, hey, I'm having this issue with my employee, how can I tackle it, what can I do, and they can guide you through that also. So just putting that out there, that we can have these resources at hand.
Yeah, you all are spot on. We can definitely utilize insurance brokers, and we need to make sure that we're all kind of supporting, one another. Um, to me, if someone's abusing mental health resources or mental health days, and that's inexcusable. It, in all honesty, it would be the same thing as if someone was, oh, I'm of X origin, I can talk poorly about somebody else in my opinion. Um, and I think it needs to be addressed right then and there. What is the issue beyond this? Because if you truly have mental health issues, we want to support that. But like Robin said, work needs to be done. And it's having a candid conversation with that employee, and stopping that in its tracks. If it's, inappropriate, it's taking away from those who truly have, mental health issues. Maybe they're battling depression, or and maybe an eating disorder or something like that, and it's taking that away from them, and it's just not respecting your fellow coworker. So it may be cause for dismissal at some point of time if that continues to happen, and that's a reality of what we're facing. But we there's a respect line, and we need to make sure that people are respecting one another and respecting each other's issues. It shouldn't be all of everybody's business. Oh, Jackie in finance has depression, so can I, or whatever. So it's our job as HR to protect that and protect that information from getting out, but also support each other and provide resources and education for our employees on where to go. They don't necessarily need to call us and tell us. They can talk to their insurance providers and take their time off as needed. So just all encompassing, honestly.
Thank you. Deborah, I just want to check if you want to come back into this conversation and add something.
I think the only thing I would add is that, there are always going to be employees that may potentially abuse different types of leave. And I think, to me, often we should not make the assumption that they're abusing first. We should explore that a little bit more because, the majority of the time I find that there's always something else going on that we don't know. Not always, because, we all know that there are, people that may be looking to sort of leverage everything, but generally there's something else going on, and check in and make sure that we're not making the assumption that they're abusing, because mental health is not one of those issues that you can physically see that they've got a cast on the leg, or that they're stressed or tired. You don't know what they're feeling. So make sure that you have that conversation first. That would be the only piece that I would add.
Mm. Listening to your answers, you triggered my curiosity on something. And that is, what are some of the fundamental critical skills underpinning mental health conversations? And I am particularly interested in skills that are not necessarily that visible. So, can you think of skills that are really critical, and extra points for outlier skills, that come into this skill set?
Okay, let's see if I can get some extra points. So, how about boundaries? Being able to establish your boundaries, your personal boundaries when having a discussion with the mental health. And I think a lot of people go into the sort of let's solve their problem, but most of us aren't, psychologists or counselors that have that expertise. So I think that that's particularly important. And then maybe self-awareness being another one, because having that discussion with an individual, how do you manage your own emotions and reactions? And of course, the easy ones are active listening and empathy and all those, but hopefully I got bonus points for boundaries and self-awareness.
Thank you. Now, from the infinite source of points, who wants to claim their own?
I think communication is very important skill. What happens is a lot of times we think we're communicating, but we're not, because we're not doing active listening. We are listening to respond. We're not listening to understand what somebody is saying. So that's a very critical skill. I think everybody needs to work on and develop active listening skill. And then, like Deborah said, establish boundaries and what you're going to accept, what you're not going to accept. And it's okay to say, I don't know, let me find out. Or, you know what, I am sorry you're feeling this way, let me check on this, let me find out what we can do. And also know your limits, know your own limits. I think that's very important as an HR professional for you too, because we're not trained social workers, we're not trained psychologists. So know your own limits. You can be empathetic, you can listen, and honestly, most of the time, when somebody is talking to you and saying things to you, they want you to listen, not kind of like just they just want to take it and just sit there and just listen to what they're saying. And I would say that it is imperative for us to be good HR professionals in this day and age, is to keep continually educating ourselves and training ourselves on all the issues that impact our workforce, and just be there for them when need be. So that's what I'm going to say.
I will also add on a skill is addressing your own biases. I have so many, and I have to realize that I do. And when it comes to, there's unconscious bias as well as, where somebody's background from. Oh, they grew up in a privileged family. They went to, Yale, for example. They don't have any real issues to worry about. And that is something that I have thought before. And I think it's a real, skill to know, hey, this is a bias I've had before. Let's address that and fix it. And then teaching others to do the same, and teaching, your leaders to also look at what their unconscious bias may be. And that goes into a whole nother training, of course, but that's one skill that, came to mind here.
I was going to say the same thing, because there needs to be, in light of dynamic skills and elevating skills, HR professionals, we need to move from being traditional and transactional to really being relational. And that's what I've been, pushing a lot of, like, how do we move from being just traditional, oh, this is the number of PTO days, or this is the number of leaves, in transactional, with actually seeing the person and relating. Skill is relationship management. It's what Renee said on the comments. It's understanding EQ, your emotions, grounding yourself first. Where am I at? What am I feeling? What are my biases? How am I going to engage in this conversation? Check that self-awareness, that humility to understand that you do not know, you don't have the answers, you don't know what everyone is feeling. start with yourself first, and see how you're able to be in a place where you could then be in a conversation that is all of the above: listening, biases, relationship, emotions that come into play. So we need to start elevating our skills much more on relationship management, on emotional, on our emotional intelligence, and on DEI. HR has gone through a pathway that is very much on the traditional ways, comp benefits, this different aspects, less so much on DEI. And the more the world is getting much more complex, and people are, are coming into their full selves and their identities and their race, and even the invisible diversity that we see, we need to be much, much more skilled, with those.
Mm. Absolutely amazing answers, and I did pick up on Renee's comment in the chat, and a big thank you to her, because I really loved what she said about emotion recognition and emotional literacy, the ability to understand what you're feeling and label it accurately. So that really caught my eye, and having a large emotional vocabulary. Um, I was debating whether to ask this or not, but we still have a handful of minutes before, sadly, we have to say goodbye today. There's a lot of energy and appetite for everything data in the workplace nowadays. So the question is, what is the meaningful data around mental health in workplace, and how can it be most meaningfully used?
Great question. I'll circle back to, what I said initially about productivity. And just kind of looking at, you can't ever tell for sure if someone's taking PTO for a mental health day or not, unless you have specified mental health days. I'm at a small organization. I just know when people take PTO or not. So I can't necessarily utilize that data. But, reaching out to our insurance brokers and, hey, how many people have utilized, our EAP system or just different resource groups? I think that would be great data to know if the conversation that we have on educating them goes to anything. Are people actually utilizing the tools that we have in place for them? And then ultimately, once those, once conversations have happened, words are tricky today, and we've trained our leaders up, touching base with those leaders, and not necessarily even needing to know names, but just, hey, have you, approached these conversations? Have people, talk to you more about this? How are you feeling ultimately? But also seeing, have their teams gotten more productive? Maybe they're hitting their sales goals more because people are taking a Friday off or a half day morning or whatever it may be, to take care of themselves and take care of their families. So those to me are some data points that we can look at, to really see if these mental health conversations are making an impact.
Thank you, Jenna. Robin. Oh, Sajal, and then Robin.
Okay. I agree with what Gianna said. You can utilize your employee assistance program if you have one, and they can give you a utilization report so you can see how many people have used it. I drive employee assistance program. Literally every month I'll send an email out and about different topics that they can be with employee assistance. So we just really, really hone it. So make sure that our employees are using it and they know it's confidential. I'm not going to know what you call them for. So that data helps. Also, one thing is, if an employee has a number of absences, rather than just giving a write-up and saying you had this many absences and quoting policy, the question should be, Can you tell me what's going on? What's happening? You've had so many absences. Everything okay? Just having that conversation and asking, and just peeling onions. Right now, it's about just peeling layers from people and just getting all that information. I think that's very important. And then utilize your vendors. Your vendors have a lot of data, a lot of resources, that they can provide you. And you know what? Just ask. There's no harm in asking. If you don't ask, you won't know the answer. So I think using all of that, using your if you have an HRIS system, using the data that's in there, running reports and understanding what that means can help you understand your employee population.
I am all about analytics. We cannot do our jobs. We cannot make decisions. We cannot implement people programs or any people related, people first initiatives without analytics. I definitely ask for utilization reports. We share it out also with the institution because it's important, right? Again, it's back to normalizing all of this. How do we normalize these discussions? How do we normalize what we're seeing that our workforce is experiencing and enduring? And therefore, what are the ways that we can cultivate changes in our systems, in our processes to support our people? So I'm all about, as Sajal said, we get utilization reports from our EAP, from our providers. We have quarterly meetings, about them. We look through it. We have absences data. We've got leaves data. All of that is really important. I cannot stress enough about people analytics and its importance.
Thank you. Deborah, bring this conversation home.
Yeah, there's so many things that you can use for metrics, and everybody's talked about the different ones. And I think you can add in turnover and engagement rates, and probably exit interviews into that group of things that can help measure metrics. And I wholeheartedly agree with Robin. I mean, this day and age, you have to have metrics to be able to determine whether or not your programs are effective. So if you implement something, do an assessment before and do an assessment after. See what if you get productivity or if you get decreases in leave. And then to me, it's there's so many great metrics you can use, and metrics need to be individualized to the organization and what's important to them.
Thank you all so very much. And let's have a very short mic drop moment, wrap up round. What I will do, I will pass the e-mic around counterclockwise. That means, Robin, you go first. As we sit in the energy of our conversation today, what is the first word, one word that comes to mind when you hear mental health? Robin.
Compassion.
Thank you. Jana.
Man, Robin, that was going to be mine. Wellness.
Thank you. Deborah.
Support.
And Sajal, one word, mental health.
Empowerment.
Thank you all so very much. Sajal, Deborah, Jana, and Robin. It was a joy and a privilege hosting you today. Thank you, everybody listening and watching now or later on when you enjoy the recording. We really hope that you enjoyed this conversation at least as much as we did. And that my colleagues and I, we will have the pleasure to welcome you in future conversations throughout the month. Go to hackinghrlab.io to see this recording or anything else from our March-April series, and then moving through the year ahead. Thank you, and wishing you all a calm and kind and empowered mental health month. Thank you.